Okay, I don't think anybody else is going to join us today. If they do, they can log on a little later. Again, good morning. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jessica Ayers. I'm the Director of Financial Aid. Also on this webinar or on this call is Isabel Huarte, who is the Assistant Director of Financial Aid. Many of you probably have been working with her for over the time that you've been here at Palo Alto for securing your financial aid. So Isabel, we appreciate your time this morning. Again, as a friendly reminder, if you have any questions, we ask that you put that in the Q&A box, and we'll get those answered as soon as possible or at the end of today's webinar. So before you leave PAU, we wanted to provide you some detailed information about managing your student loans. Excuse me. And so we're going to talk about today all various things as it relates to student loan repayment. So, here we go. We're going to start off very basic. We're going to kind of talk about what financial aid, the basics of financial aid. We're going to talk about what loan servicers mean, what that impact is to you, the basics of student loans, the various repayment plans, what deferment and forbearance is in case you need those, and then of course the big bad ones, delinquency, default, and collections, and then the more fun one, the one to kind of look forward to, which is maybe student loan forgiveness, discharge, or cancellation. So just as a quick review, of course, when we talk about financial aid, they come from all different kind of entities, right? So in regards to your student loans, they came from the federal government. There are other states, not California, but there are other states that provide loans as well. Colleges and universities provide aid. Some of you may have been receiving the Palo Alto University scholarship. And then, of course, private foundation, employers or companies will often provide aid to students, and then professional service organizations. So likely while you were here, you received a variety of financial aid, and those could include anything from student loans, merit awards, scholarships, fellowships, or even work study. So the main difference between all those is what's called gift aid versus self-help aid. Gift aid is money that is given to you. It doesn't have to be repaid. And self-help aid is aid where essentially it's part of your contribution. So that would include things like federal work study, and then of course student loans, because ultimately you have to repay those student loans. And then underneath student loans, there's basically two kinds: the federal student loans, which most of our students at Palo Alto University use, versus private student loans. And so essentially what private student loans are loans that you get through a bank or a lender. And the most important thing about student loans is knowing your balance. And this bottom question is more rhetorical. How many of you actually know the total balance of your student loans? If you don't today, or have been secretly avoiding it these last couple of years, we're going to give you some tools so that you can go out and review your balances and manage your loans. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about private student loans, but I did want to take just a quick minute for any of you that may have borrowed private student loans while at school. The main differences between private and federal is that there are many private students that require repayment while in school. They also have variable interest rates. And their interest isn't subsidized by the federal government, obviously, because it's done with a private lender. They usually require established credit or really good credit. And if you don't have that, then they generally require a co-signer. Long-term, the bummer with private student loans is that they can't be consolidated into any other loans that you've had, federal student loans, at least not with the federal government. So in other words, you couldn't get a federal loan consolidation and include any private borrowing that you've done. But there are some private lenders that do offer private loan consolidation. The other kind of bummer about private student loans long term is they don't offer the same kind of forbearance or deferment options. Those are pretty limited. And then finally, there is no forgiveness for private student loans. So you may or may not know it, but the Department of Education tracks all of your federal loan history from the time that you did your first FAFSA. And they do that on a website called the National Student Loan Data System, NSLDS. And it's centralized by the federal government. It also tracks your federal grants, but for graduate students, as you know, you don't qualify for federal grants. But if you had grants in your undergraduate degree, you would see that information out at NSLDS. So what's cool about it is it shows basically your history with the federal student loans, where you borrowed them, how much you borrowed, what the outstanding principal balance is. It also shows your current enrollment status. So you access NSLDS here. Let me just pop back. It's nslds.ed.gov. Okay. This is what the first page looks like. As a side note, we're going to require you to do loan exit counseling, online loan exit counseling. If you remember when you first started taking loans at PAU, you had to do online entrance counseling. So now you're going to do online exit counseling. And in your online exit counseling, it's going to have detailed information about NSLDS. So I don't want you to panic here. If I kind of move through these slides rather quickly, you will actually get this information sent to you. But this is what the first page looks like. So you can click on financial aid review, which is down here towards the bottom. And then also, you can also complete exit counseling here as well. So once you log in to NSLDS, it allows for you to choose on a variety of things that you can do and or that you can review, which is over here on the left-hand side of the page. Okay. So when you log into NSLDS and you review your financial aid loan, or you review your loan history, you're going to see that all of your loans are assigned to what's called a loan servicer. And essentially what a loan servicer is it's a company or an organization that is going to manage your student loan. Okay, and so they're essentially organizations that the Department of Education contracts to collect payments on your federal student loan. They provide customer service on your federal student loan, and then all the administrative tasks that are associated with the student loan. So these are private companies, but they're acting on behalf of the Department of Education. Okay. And as I mentioned, when you look at your financial aid, or excuse me, your loan history, you'll see, for example, if it said Jessica PA borrowed at for the 17-18 academic year, borrowed $10,000 worth of student loans at PAU. When I pop open that loan itself on NSLDS, it will tell me who the servicer is. Okay. So in terms of basic kinds of student loans, even though we talked about federal versus private, here there is all different kinds of federal student loans. And I take a minute to say this because some of you may have borrowed in your undergraduate degree. Some of you may have received your bachelor's degree many years ago and were a returning student to graduate school. And over time, the kinds of federal student loans that the Department of Education has provided has changed. So when you look at your loan portfolio, as it were, on NSLDS, you may see any or all of these listed out there, okay? But all of them are federal student loans. Okay, so how does interest work on student loans? The way that interest works is it's called simple daily interest. What simple means is that the interest that accrues doesn't compound unless there's a specific event for it to that creates it to compound. Okay. That event is always when you go back into repayment or you go into repayment. So for example, when you get done here at PAU, you're going to have 6-month grace period before your PAU loans go into repayment. At the point that they go into repayment, the servicer is going to take all that interest that has accrued, and they're going to add it to your the total amount that you have borrowed, and then they're going to start charging you interest on that new sum. Okay, so that's what's called compounding interest. Okay, so anytime that you go into repayment, any interest that accrued prior to that will get compounded, or some people call it capitalized. Okay. Daily interest means that the interest accrues daily. So let me show you a quick calculation, or let's review a calculation so that you can kind of understand. We're going to use a $10,000 loan, and we're going to say that it has an interest rate of 4.66. So the way that the formula works is you take the interest rate, you divide it by the number of days in the year, and then you multiply that by the outstanding principal balance. Okay, so in this particular case, we mentioned that the interest rate is 4.66. We're going to divide it by 365 because that's the total number of days in the year. Then we multiply that by $10,000, which is the loan amount. That means that $1.27 of interest accrues on a daily basis. Okay. Now, if we use that previous example, what this means is that while you were in school, you weren't making any payments because the loans were completely deferred. So on this $10,000 loan, that means that every day $1.27 of interest was accruing. And if we come back to compounding, what that means is they're going to add up all those days or all those $1.27s. They're going to add it to the $10,000. And then that new total, the $10,000 plus all that interest is accrued, is what's going to be the new total of your loan. Okay. So that's how interest works. So I just put in a slide here to show you what the interest rates were for this year. Now, the rates change every year. So just because the interest rates, for example, on the unsubsidized loan for graduate students was 6%, the interest rate, if you had taken it in the 16-17 academic year, was different. The good news is these are all fixed rates, so they'll never change over the life of the loan. But when you go into NSLDS and review the loans, you'll notice that depending on what year that you took them, will determine what the interest rate is. In addition, if you have very old loans, like myself, I got my bachelor's degree in the early 90s. Those loans are so old that it was back in the back when the Department of Education didn't have fixed interest rates. There were variable rates, those loans were. So you'll notice that there is some difference, okay? So how are payments applied? So essentially what happens is any payment that you make on your student loans, they're going to be applied to any fees that are associated with the loan. Then they're going to be applied to the interest that is accrued. And then at the very end, they'll be applied to the principal, okay? So the good news is that for most of you, the Department of Education has not charged any fees in repayment for a very long time. So unless you have some of those very old loans, the loans that you took at PAU won't have any fees, repayment fees associated with them. So again, if we're using that previous example with the $10,000 loan and the interest rate of 4.66%, then what's going to happen is that any payment that you make will be applied to the fees first, which there are none. Then part of it is going to go to the interest, and then the remaining amount is going to go towards the principal. Okay. So let's talk about repayment plans. One of the cool things that I think about federal student loans is, as you can see, there's all different kinds of ways that you can choose to repay your student loan. The other cool thing I think is that you could enroll in one payment plan now, and then 2 or 3 years from now, realize that repayment plan is no longer the best option for you, and so you can change it. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of repayment and choosing how you repay your student loan. Okay. So the repayment plans are divided into kind of two kinds, really. The traditional plans, which are these top ones, standard, extended, graduated, and then the bottom ones, which are income-driven repayment plans. So now let's review the repayment plans. So, and the way that the standard repayment plan works is essentially they take the total amount that you borrowed, they divide it up over 10 years, and then you make equal monthly payments. Minimum payment is $50. Generally speaking, and for most all students, the standard repayment plan long term, so over the life of the loan, is the least expensive, right? Because you generally speaking get it paid off quicker. And so the quicker you pay off a loan, the less interest you pay, the less it costs you, okay? So generally speaking, long term, standard is going to be the least expensive. There's also something called extended repayment. And what extended repayment is that if you have at least $30,000 in student loan debt, you have the option to extend your repayment out beyond 10 years, up to 25 years, right? So if you find that the standard repayment plan, a monthly amount is too steep or too much, then you could do an extended repayment plan. Okay. Again, the repayment it has to be at least $50 a month. And the thing to keep in mind, again, with any extended repayment plan, the longer you pay on the loan, the more interest you pay, so the more expensive it will be. Okay. The next is something called a graduated repayment. Now you can do graduated repayment under standard, meaning you can do graduated repayment under 10 years, or you could also do graduated with extended. What graduated means is kind of a stair-step approach. Every 2 years, the monthly amount that you pay will increase. So let's say you get out of school and your first 2 years, it's $100. Then the next 2 years, it's $150. And the next 2 years, it's $200, so on and so forth. So it's kind of this stair-step approach. And the idea is that over time, your income increases, right? And so as your income increases, your ability to pay your student loans also increases, okay? Consolidation. So consolidation used to be much more attractive when there used to be a lot of variable rate loans. But federal loan consolidation still exists. And essentially what it does is it's going to take all of your previous federal student loans and it's going to combine them together to give you one end result, which is one loan, a consolidation loan, okay? The way that they determine the interest rate for the consolidation loan is they take a weighted average of your previous federal loans. So what they do is they look at all the unsubsidized loans you had, all the Grad Plus loans you had, they average out all those individual interest rates and give you a weighted average for the consolidation loan. Okay. The consolidation loan is also a fixed rate. Now, sometimes students will come to me and they'll say, I want to do a consolidation loan because I just want to have one loan and one payment. The thing is that even though you have taken multiple loans, all of your loans will be assigned to one servicer. So let's say that over the time at PAU, you have 10 different loans, okay? All 10 of those loans will be assigned to one servicer. And let's say that servicer is Fed Loan Servicing, okay? So all 10 of those loans will be assigned to Fed Loan Servicing. Fed Loan Servicing will only send you one bill. It'll show you all the outlines it'll show you the detail for all the individual loans. It'll show you the interest that is accrued for all the individual loans, but it will only come in one bill. Okay, so in terms of the necessity to have a consolidation, it isn't an absolute need. It's more of a convenience and something that is a comfort level for people. Okay. So some of the benefits of doing loan consolidation, here it says one lender. What it means is one servicer. But again, one servicer will be managing all your federal loans and giving you one monthly payment. It allows you, though, if you do a consolidation loan, when you are choosing your repayment program, you only have to choose it for one loan, the consolidation loan, as opposed to choosing the repayment program for the multiple different loans. As I mentioned, it does have a fixed interest rate, but so were the loans that you received here at PAU. It does combine all the loans that you've had. So it will combine subsidized, unsubsidized, and the Graduate Plus loan. Okay. Okay, so the next kind of repayment program is the income-driven repayment. And so what these next few slides are going to be about are repayment plans that are going to be based on your income. And there's 3, I believe, if I remember correctly. So the first one is called income-based repayment, IBR for short, okay? And essentially the way that these work is you provide documentation of your income, the number of people in your family, and where you're living. And what they do is they determine what your discretionary income is. So for example, if you say, I earn $100,000, then they're going to say, and you're a family of one, they're going to say for one person who earns $100,000 who lives in California, for example, this much of the money should be paid towards housing. This much of the money should be spent towards transportation. This much of the money should be spent towards healthcare, so on and so forth, all the way down. So it allots a certain amount to each category in order for you to live. The amount that's left over is considered your discretionary income, okay? And they believe that the student loans for the IBR plan should only consist of 15% of that discretionary income. So again, it's not 15% of your gross, it's 15% of the discretionary income, all the income that's left over after your basic needs are met. Okay. So the good thing about the most beneficial thing about income-based repayment is that IBR is going to be based on what you can afford on your income. So that if you get out of school and you're earning very little, $50,000, $60,000, then regardless of the total amount of debt that you have, it will be based on what they think that you can afford to pay. Okay. The other cool thing, and we're going to talk more in detail later about the IBR plan, is that if you have any residual balance after 25 years on this plan, that amount will be forgiven. Also, the IBR plan is eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So 2 options here to have your student loans forgiven. Okay. And one of the disadvantages of IBR, but this is going to be the disadvantage of any of the income-driven repayments, and that is that you have to recertify every year. In other words, you have to document what your income is every year. And what they require is basically you provide them a copy of your income tax return. Okay. The next one is called income contingent. And it works the same way. The difference is that this is based on, 20% of your discretionary income. Okay. This also will be forgiven after 25 years. It also qualifies for public service loan forgiveness. And you have to recertify every year. So you'll see some common themes here among these 3 income-based repayment. Income-driven repayment. And then finally, the pay-as-you-earn. This is the newest income-driven repayment plan. This one is also the most favorable. This is 10% of your discretionary income. the other nice thing and difference about pay as you earn, you'll notice here that in comparison to the IBR and ICR, loan forgiveness will happen after 20 years, not 25 years. So they actually shave off an additional 5, which is really great. It also will qualify for public service loan forgiveness. And you have to recertify the every year. The other thing, and I apologize, I forgot to mention, if you want to enroll in any of these income-driven repayment plans, your loans, in order for them to be eligible for income-driven repayment, whether it's pay-as-you-earn, IBR, or ICR, they have to be a direct loan. So again, I'm speaking to any students that had old loans that you may have borrowed federal student loans under what was called the FEL program, the FFEL or FEL program. Those loans in their current state as a FEL loan are not eligible for income-driven repayment. Okay. Now you'll know the difference between the two because when you're looking at your loans in NSLDS, it will say direct loan or it will say FEL loan. So you'll know the difference. I don't want you to panic or worry about that. If you have old FEL loans that you would like to become eligible for income-driven repayment, I encourage you to contact your servicer and they can help you with that process. Essentially what you'll do is you'll roll those over into a direct loan so that you can then become eligible to take advantage of one of these income-driven repayment plans. Okay. So here's an example, and I took this directly from the Department of Education's website. This wasn't anything that I did, and I'm going to show you where you can go out and do this with your own loans. Felicia has $225,000 in direct loan debt, and we're going to say that just for the sake of this example, that all of those loans have an interest rate of 4.66%. Of course, we know that's not true because as we talked about earlier, each of the loans will have different interest rates, but for the sake of this example. So we mentioned, in this example, we're going to say that she's earning $90,000. She's single, meaning she's a family of one, and she lives in California. Now, the reason I put that her income increases at a rate of 5% per year is because the repayment plan summary on the Department of Education's website assumes that each year your salary will increase by at least 5%, okay? So I shared that with you just so that you understood the example here, not that I assume that you will actually have an overall pay increase of 5% per year. So essentially what this does is it breaks out the various repayment plans. It tells you what your initial payment would be. So if you look on here, you can see just quickly that any of the income-driven repayments are going to be the least expensive to you. This is the IBR plan, this is the ICR plan, and then this is the pay-as-you-earn, okay? So it tells you, again, what your initial payment would be. Remember that I said that the Department of Education assumes that your income increases at least 5% per year. The reason it does that is because, remember, with income-driven repayment, you have to recertify your income. So as your income increases over time, so will your monthly payment amount also increase over time. So with the pay-as-you-earn plan, you start out repaying at $600 a month. But by the time that you finish paying on the loan, your monthly payment will be $2,153, okay? Now that's assuming that you pay it out over the 25 years, okay? So you'll see here, this is the total amount. You started out with $225, okay? And this will be the total amount that you will have paid over time if you take it out to the time and repayment. Okay, so if you take it out, if we're looking at pay as you earn, if you take it out to 25 years, the total amount you will have paid is $368,657. This is the amount that you'll have paid in interest, but you'll see that you'll have had $163 $548 forgiven with the regular loan forgiveness, not public service loan forgiveness, but regular loan forgiveness, okay? If you are interested in public service loan forgiveness, and we're going to talk about the details in a bit, but public service loan forgiveness is only 10 years of repayment, right? So if we were to come back here, let's look at income contingent. They're saying that you could have the full loan paid off in 16 years. What would essentially happen is those last 6 years would be forgiven. So your actual final payment may not be $2,832 because it would be somewhere between these two, because your final payment would have been at 10 years, not the 16, okay? So the overall interest you would have paid would have been less, and the overall total paid would have been less, okay? Come on, there we go. So as I mentioned, you can both sign up for the different repayment plans, the income-driven repayment plans, and also review a repayment summary that's specific to you out at studentloans.gov, okay? So you'll go out to studentloans.gov, you'll log in. You'll see here, though, even right at the bottom of the page, there is a link that says use the repayment estimator. So you could click on that and then it would take you to the login page. Or you can log in, which is what the login page looks like. And once you log in, you'll be given the same options over here. You can use the repayment estimator that's a little bigger. And then you can also apply for any of the income-driven repayment plans here. Also, if you chose to do your loan consolidation, you could do that here as well, okay? So studentloans.gov is going to be kind of the hub of where you're going to be able to manage all of your student loan repayment. Okay, so postponing payments. Essentially, there's two ways in which you can postpone or get a break from paying your student loans. One is deferment and the other is forbearance. Deferment, it means that your monthly payment is deferred. You're not required to make it for a specific period of time. Deferment is granted if you are in school. So for example, right now, all of your loans are in what's called in-school deferment. But there's other occasions when you can qualify for deferment, and that is if you become unemployed, you have an excessive economic hardship, you are in a graduate fellowship. So this may be applicable to some of you who do a postdoc. You can have a deferment on your student loans. If you're doing some sort of rehabilitation training program, you're in the military, etc. So if you don't qualify for a deferment, then your other choice is to do a forbearance. And there's a variety of qualifications for forbearance. The interesting thing is that what forbearance does is one of two things. It will either lower your monthly payment to something that is more affordable to you at that time. So let's say, for example, you have some unexpected health care costs, and you just need to lower your student monthly payment for a couple of months so that you can get those health care costs paid off, kind of funnel money somewhere else. So what they'll do is they'll lower your monthly payment for a period of time. And then once that period of time is over, let's say 3 months, then they'll put you back to your normal monthly payment, and there's no effect on your credit. Or they can even give you a temporary cessation of payments, meaning that you don't have to make any monthly payment at all. So your question may be, well, if you're not making any payment at all, what's the difference between deferment and forbearance? The deferment has all the benefits of your in-school deferment, meaning, and for graduate students, really all this means is that if you had any subsidized loans from your undergraduate degree, in other words, those loans where the government was paying interest, they'll start paying the interest on those loans again, okay? Whereas if you're in your forbearance and you have subsidized loans, they're gonna let that interest accrue and they're gonna compound it. So really that's the only difference. But both deferment and forbearance offer either a temporary cessation of payments or a lowering of payments. Okay. Oh, I just talked about all this. I kind of got ahead of myself. As I mentioned, because the deferments offer additional benefits in terms of paying the interest on those subsidized loans, you have to be eligible, you have to qualify. Whereas with forbearance, because it doesn't have those same kind of benefits that deferment does, they're very easy to qualify for, okay? Now remember that any time that you go into repayment, that interest will capitalize, or the interest will compound. So if you have a forbearance or a deferment, even if they lower your monthly payment, interest is still accruing. And so when you go back into paying your regular monthly payment, that interest will capitalize, okay? Interest is super sneaky like that. Okay. So what happens if you don't pay, right? I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because what we have found is that PAU students, generally speaking, can manage their student loan repayment. We have a very low default rate, and I would like to say it's because we provide you all the information necessary to manage your loans adequately, but I really think it just has to do with the kind of students that graduate from PAU, and that you're well-informed and responsible citizens. But I do want to take a minute to talk about delinquency and default, just so that you know what those definitions are and what that looks like. So loan delinquency basically is, and it begins the first day after you miss your payment, right? And at that moment, so let's say your loan payment is due on the 15th of the month. You don't pay it on the 15th, then on the 16th, the loan is considered delinquent. And on the 16th, your loan servicer, excuse me, your loan servicer is going to begin outreach activities. So they're going to start calling you, they're going to start emailing you. If you've signed up for text messages, they're going to text you. And they're going to do that continuously to help bring you current, okay? So now, remember that these are, the servicers are stewards of the Department of Education. So they're not like collection agencies. So I don't want you to be afraid of them, because they're representatives of the Department of Education. They're there to help you. And their interest is to help bring you, they're interested in helping you get you current. And so they can help you not only get you current, but help determine, you know, if a payment wasn't affordable to you, maybe we should apply for a forbearance, or maybe we need to consider a different kind of repayment program, okay? But if after 269 days, you still have not made payment or attempted to make any payment, then on day 270, the loan goes into default, okay? So, right, default's not a good thing, especially because you're defaulting on a federal loan as opposed to with a private lender. Of course, your credit's going to be affected. You'll no longer be eligible for any future for federal student aid. Your loan becomes payable in full. Oops, at that point. My apologies. You also, once you go into default, you lose the ability to try to do any sort of forbearance or deferment, because the Department of Education has just given you 269 days to try to apply for one of those, and you haven't, so you lose that. Then they will turn the loan over to a contracted collection agency. And if the collection agency doesn't collect on the loan, then your wages will be garnished, and any tax refunds that you're expecting will also be seized, okay? So default is a big no-no, especially to the Department of Education. Okay, so what are some ways to get out of default? If you find yourself in default, the best thing to do is to contact the collections agency. They'll put you in contact with the servicer and work with you to get you out of default by doing one of these options. You can always repay the loan in full, right? You can consolidate and then agree to make payments under an income-driven repayment plan. You can consolidate after making 3 on-time payments, or you can rehabilitate the loan, okay? Okay, so We know that you're not going to be delinquent or default on your student loan, but there are some things to look forward to as it relates to loan forgiveness. And the Department of Education also offers discharge and cancellation. So we'll talk about under what circumstances those happen. So there is several circumstances under which either a loan is discharged, forgiven, or canceled. One is upon your death. The second is if you become permanently disabled. The third is public service. And the fourth is teaching. We won't spend any time talking about teaching because it's not applicable here. I'm sorry, let me come back. So, and let me review these really quick. So upon your death, all of your loans, all of the interest are completely discharged. So your family, your estate, will not be responsible for any federal student loan debt, okay? Disability, you have to be diagnosed as permanently disabled. You apply for disability with your loan servicer. And after documentation, probably extensive documentation to determine that you become permanently disabled, then all of your loans, all the interest will become completely discharged, okay? And I'm sorry, I wanted to mention one other thing regarding upon death. If you have student loans and upon your death, your family has to apply for the discharge. In other words, they don't just automatically go away. Your family has to contact the loan servicer and provide a copy of the death certificate for those loans to be canceled. Okay, so then the last one is public service loan forgiveness that we're going to talk about here because again, the teacher loan forgiveness is not applicable. But this one is what we're pretty excited about, and it is particularly applicable to our student population. So essentially, what public service loan forgiveness is you work in a qualifying organization. And at a very high level, what a qualifying organization is you either work for like the federal, state, local government, county, or you work for a nonprofit, or you work for an organization that serves the public at large, meaning like, for example, Kaiser Hospital. Kaiser Hospital is a for-profit hospital, but it serves the public at large, okay? Now, please note, I'm not saying that if you work for Kaiser, you can have your loans forgiven. I'm just saying that that's an example of one, okay? So you are, so essentially you work for a qualifying organization. You have direct loans. So remember that in order to have public service loan forgiveness, also in order to qualify for one of the repayment programs, the income-driven repayment programs, you have to have direct loans. So work for a qualifying organization, you have direct loans, you are in an income-driven repayment plan, and you're working full-time at that qualifying employer. You make 120 payments. So the math says that's 10 years. The payments have to be on time. Then after that 10 years, any residual loan balance will be forgiven. Okay. And the amount that's forgiven is not considered taxable income, which is really great. So essentially it's forgiven and it just goes away. All right. It's a really cool program. Okay. Oh, here's where we talk about it. 120 payments for any loans on or after 2007. Oh, I didn't mention that the payments don't have to be consecutive. So you just have to make 120 payments. So that's generally speaking why people don't say 10 years. So for example, you could get out, go work for the VA for 3 years. You're clocking your time in the public service loan forgiveness. And then you decide, you know what, I want to do private practice. So you do private practice for a couple of years. So during that couple of years while you're doing private practice, those payments that you're making are not counting towards public service loan forgiveness. But let's say you're done with private practice. Actually, the VA is really where I wanted to be. You go back to the VA, then you can start clocking your time again. So at the point that you hit 120 payments, even though it may take you 15 years to do that, the point that you hit a payment 120, those loans will be forgiven. Okay. And so here are the repayment plans that count for public service loan forgiveness. We already talked about that, income-driven repayment. Oh, more detail about what kinds of qualifying employers. So I said a government organization, not-for-profit, and then the last one, serving the public. Okay. So for additional resources, you can always go out to studentaid.gov. There's a wealth of information out here. You'll see at the top of this page towards the right, there's a tab that actually says repay your student loans. Some of that is where I pulled today's information from. And it will also allow you, it'll answer most all of your questions. But if you really have specific questions about your specific student loans, any kind of repayment, how interest works, how you can pay on your interest, how do you enroll, I would really encourage you to establish a relationship with your servicer. That's what they're there for. They're there to help you manage your student loans in a way that is best for you, okay? As always, you're more than welcome to contact our office. We're here to help anything that we can, but certainly we're not, our area of expertise is getting financial aid while you're in school, and we do know a lot about what it's like after repayment, but we're not experts like your servicers, okay? And remember how on this last slide I said repay your student loans. So if you click on there, it'll actually take you to a page where you can log in and then do some of those other things that we talked about, okay? Finally, the other thing I wanted to mention is last year, our office went through and went out and searched for programs that are called repayment assistance programs. Now, these are not loan forgiveness programs. Only the Department of Education can forgive, cancel, or discharge your loan. But these are programs that usually require some sort of work service in turn, but will provide you money to help pay towards your student loans, okay? So for example, with the National Health Service Corps, you could earn up to $170,000 to pay towards your student loans, and your commitment is only 2 to 5 years, okay? So we have a chart that we created with all different kinds of organizations that offer these kinds of repayment assistance. So again, they're not loan forgiveness, it's repayment assistance. So it's worth checking out to see if any of these might be applicable to you. They might also help drive your decision about where you want to work and what kinds of work you want to do. Okay, more information about the Department of Education. And again, you can always contact us at financialaid@paloaltou.edu or call us at 650-433-3824. I'm sure everybody is familiar with those numbers. So we'll take any questions now. I do see a couple of chats, so I'll go into the chats and see what people had to say. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Isabel. Somebody asked if we can have a copy of the slides. Yes, we'd be happy to send you a copy of the PowerPoint today and anything else you may need. So someone asked, can you speak more to the public service forgiveness option? The first 10-year cohort was this past fall. Are they actually being forgiven? So everything that we're reading, the answer is yes. There is actually people who have had their student loans forgiven underneath this program. The reason that this program has been in the news lately is because when this program was launched, so let me backtrack for a second. Much of financial aid policy is produced by Congress. And as you might imagine, Congress comes up with this legislation and then they hand it over to a specific federal department and they say, you make it work. And so when this particular legislation came out, that Congress is the one that passed it, along with a lot of other student loan legislation at the time, and handed it over to the Department of Education. And it became effective immediately, but the department didn't have any sort of plan or process in which to handle this. And so what happened is in the early years of the program, there wasn't a lot of clear, transparent information regarding the public service loan forgiveness. And so what ended up happening was there was people in the very beginning of this program who thought they were clocking time towards public service loan forgiveness and weren't, or were told that they were clocking time, but the information that they were given was incorrect. Since that time, because it was passed in 2007. Since that time, specifically in the last 5 years, the Department of Education has done a really good job to establish a process, get the information out there, and have clear procedures for students. I can tell you personally, I am enrolled in the public service loan forgiveness because the universities that I've worked at are nonprofit. I have an excessive amount of student loan debt. I borrowed for my undergraduate degree and I have 2 master's degrees, so I borrowed for both of those, so I have a lot. I'm in year 6 of my 10 years, and what I do is I recertify my public service loan forgiveness every year. So every year I have my employer document that I have clocked another year underneath the qualifying organization. I also keep copies of all my paperwork that I submit, so that I can essentially protect myself. Okay. Does that answer any questions? Okay, so another person said, I also heard that they're cutting off the program in the future, and is there a deadline to get going on first payments? That is sometime this summer. So the answer is there has been talk of eliminating the public service loan forgiveness, but nothing has happened so far. In the financial aid community and from the Department of Education, they haven't given us any indication to say that the public service loan forgiveness program will go away in its entirety next week, next month, this summer, next year. I suspect, and this is my own professional opinion, that the public service loan forgiveness program will not stay as it is, that there will be made changes to it, but nobody can predict the future. Having said that, if I were you, if I was a student, I would enroll as soon as you can, enroll in an income-driven repayment plan and start clocking your public service loan forgiveness as soon as you can. So as soon as you start working for a qualifying organization, begin certifying it then. One of the good things that the Department of Education does is that they always grandfather people in. So even if, this is just an exaggeration, but even if the public service loan forgiveness program were to go away tomorrow, because I've already clocked 6 years, they will phase out people who are currently in the program. So that's why I say to you, I encourage you to enter the program as quickly as you can so that you can begin clocking, so that if the program changes or it does go away, then you'll be one of those people that's grandfathered. Okay, another person asked, would it still work if the organization is not paying us for the post-grad internship? As long, and again, these are specific questions for your servicer because I'm not an expert at this particular program, but what I understand to be true is that as long as you are considered a full-time employee, then that counts as being employed by a qualifying organization. So again, whether or not you're being paid for that I can't say, but as long, what I understand to be true is you have to be considered a full-time employee. Okay. These are great questions. Great questions. What else? Does anybody else have any additional questions? I know the idea of having all your student loans forgiven is the most exciting. So those, generally speaking, that's the ones that we get the most questions about. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm going to come into chat real quick. Let's see. Somebody asked, are you available for personal consultation? Yes, you're more than welcome to contact us and set up an appointment. We'd be happy. Again, remember that our area of expertise is federal student loans while you're in school, processing an aid, getting you together. We'd be happy to talk about after graduation, but I want to caveat that our knowledge is limited. And your best source of information is going to be your servicer. Somebody says it looks like the NHSC may not cover psychology. NHSC mentions health service psychologists. What is that? What exactly is that? I don't know. You'll have to contact the NHSC to determine what a health service psychologist is. Again, these aren't necessarily the repayment assistance programs, aren't anything that PAU necessarily is promoting. It's just research that we did on our own here in the financial aid office to look to see if there were other programs that students may be able to receive loan assistance from. So if you have specific questions about those loan repayment assistant programs, you would need to contact those organizations to ask those questions. Sorry, I can't be of more help. We just wanted to point you in the right direction and let you know that those programs existed out there. Yeah, again, somebody asked if we can get a link for this this whole recording. Isabel, can you put this in the chat, or do they just need to email us and we can email them the recording?
No, we'll have to save it and email it to them.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, just email us at financialaid@paloaltou.edu. Let us know that that's what you want. You want a recording, or you just want the PowerPoint, or you just want that loan repayment assistance chart that we did for you, and we'll get you whatever you need. Okay. All right. It's noon now. I don't want to take up any more of your day. I really appreciate you guys coming and spending time with us this morning. I hope that you found some of this helpful. We are, just as a side note, we are hosting, Isabel, how many more? Three more. So I really would, if you guys could do anything for us, if you could spread the word and encourage people to log on to the additional webinars, that would be really, really helpful. We want to get this information out to as many people as possible. Okay. So thanks again, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful Saturday. And oh, by the way, congratulations on your impending graduation. We're really excited for you. We know that you guys are too. So chat soon, everybody. Take care.